Okay, just while the PowerPoint's come up, I'll just let you know a little bit about Denmark. Denmark is a town of about 6,000 people. It's a popular tourist town, always has been. It swells out to about 18,000 people during the summer school holidays and Easter. And it went through a decline phase in the 1970s and early 80s. It had always had a difficult life. It had originally been a mill town. Over the space of about 10, 15 years, all of the trees were cut down, sent to London for paving bricks for roads, and also up to the goldfields for boiler fuel and structural timber. And then from there it had group settlers that eked out a living sort of milking 5 cattle and selling the butter, and just slowly grew from there. And then in the late 1980s, early 90s, it became a lifestyle centre for a lot of alternative lifestylers, and really has grown into a major tourism, winery, organic food region. So the project I want to talk about is the Riverside story, and it's really about the concept of scalability. For a good community social infrastructure project, it needs to be an appropriate scale for your community to embrace and enjoy. And you need to have a certain number of people getting on board with that project in order for it to be viable. And you need to keep those people engaged during the project. And I guess Council has been very successful at that. Over the last 6 years, we've rolled out about $6 million worth of community infrastructure. And so that probably equates to about $1,000 per person over that period, which is a really impressive build rate. And I guess I've already sort of been through here, but that's where Denmark's located, south of Perth, 450 kilometres. It's a tourist town. It has a lot of off-peak tourism now that's increasing. Very popular destination for weddings, sort of small corporate functions, that sort of thing, nature-based tourism. Retirement housing construction is a really big economic driver. And so there's beef, dairy, organic farming, a lot of retirees and tree changes, as well as tree farming. And this is the project I want to talk about. It's our Riverside Club project, or our bowling club project. And really we had probably the worst clubhouse and the best street. So we had a prime site close to our river, but we had the old mill town railway station from 1910, actually probably 1905, that had been derelict building. We relocated up there in the 1960s, and the club slowly renovated and put on tacky additions and maintained it well, but it was a great building for a impoverished dairy town in the 1960s, but didn't cut it in this generation. And that's another view of it. But you can see lovely backdrop across the river into town. And that's the inside, definitely in need of a major makeover or replacement. And that's it from the other side. But you can see the location there. You can see that it's right on the main entrance to town. Lovely greens overlooking the river, overlooking the main park of town. The pubs across the river. The main CBD precinct is there as well. And back in 2009, the bowling club had some problems. They just knocked back an opportunity to go into the first of our social infrastructure projects, which was a $1.5 million joint country club, golf and tennis club, because they didn't want to leave their prime location. They only had an active membership of about 120 older members, and really building a $2 to $3 million clubhouse just wasn't possible for those retirees. They had grass greens, which took a lot of time and income to maintain. And the other problem is we get a fair bit of rain in Denmark, so every time it rained, you weren't able to get on the greens for a day, so they lost income, they lost participation in their club. And while Council had a very generous funding model, and this is a really good example of one model that does stimulate social infrastructure, Council has an almost as of right 1/3 contribution policy. So if a club has a serious project, the discussion with Council is, we're coming to you with this project, we would like to access that 1/3 contribution. And the discussion and the headspace for our elected members is not whether the project should be going ahead, but whether the scale, the size, the features of the project are appropriate. So they're instantly on board as partners in that project. That gives our community groups a lot of confidence in planning, a lot of confidence in discussing. And even if all the ducks lined up, it would be a little bit of a hard push with state government agencies when there was a combined facility 1.5 kilometres down the road. and they, as members, had limited financial capacity. And also one of the difficulties bowling clubs have is because of the age of their members, they're generally 10 years away from dementia or infirmity, and so for them long-term planning is a real challenge. But they had some opportunities. What they had was they had a prime riverfront location. In Denmark, most of our river's actually quite short, and most of it is subject to Aboriginal heritage claim and clearing restrictions. So they really had the only prime spot where a water-based club could actually be. So they were fortunate. The tree change in Denmark had brought a lot of retired professionals, former Commonwealth public servants who'd worked at senior levels, and they became involved in the club, and so they sat down and they put together a project. The first thing they worked out was they were spending a fortune on maintaining grass greens that really got wet for most of the year that they couldn't use. So their first step was to put in a grant application to council for synthetic turf, which was successful, again using the third funding model, and that enabled them to retire their groundsmen and actually put the money that they saved into paying off that loan. Then, having proved that they could pay off loans early and successfully budget, they then moved up to the next scale, which was planning a new facility. They sat down, they did their sums, and they said, we need 300 members to pay off this facility. And so what they did was they stepped outside of their circle and they actually engaged with the younger Riverside clubs. So we had an active dragon boating club that had been formed, particularly using breast cancer survivors. And I guess there was a certain synergy between the bowling club. Some of those members there had survived breast cancer or knew people who had, so it's automatically a tie in there, and also the canoeing and kayaking club. So one of the things in Denmark is we have younger professionals, they love canoeing and kayaking. There's a lot of young professionals that come down from Perth to canoe and kayak. There are people who want storage space for their canoes and kayaks on the river, so it really tied in quite well. And so that started to lift their membership up to the 200 mark, and they got on quite well, so they eventually amalgamated. And that was a big step for the bowling club to sort of, in effect, give away some of their assets by amalgamating or merging with these other clubs that were quite new. And really that gave them the resources to start planning a new facility. And they came up with this, which is a new building going where their old building had, so they consulted with Aboriginal elders, looked at the corroboree ground across the other side of the bridge, and the 30-metre Aboriginal heritage separation zone on the river, and basically came up with a design concept that the Aboriginal elders were very happy with, and that matched with, I guess, the cultural expectations of the members of the club. They wanted something that worked from that perspective. And that was really what they came up with, was a new complex, and that was funded using, they managed to get $500,000 of Commonwealth Regional Development Grant funding. So really council's, as of right, third contribution was a really good leverage for that, because it said to the Commonwealth Government, the council is right behind it. Council also offers our community groups self-supporting loans. So really what we have is we have a model which is a third council funding, a third grant funding, a third source from the community group. And so in effect, this group had about $230,000 in assets, cash assets. So they then sought self-supporting loans. Council gets state government treasury loans at a reduced rate. And so in effect, we underwrite or guarantor those loans for those clubs because it's on one of our reserves. So if the club does actually fold, the building would come back to us, the debts would come back to us, we would pick up the project anyway. And that's the floor plan they came up with. So they came up with a very flexible building that can be partitioned off into rooms. It can be used as one venue, has sweeping views over the river and the bowling greens. And that's it under construction, so it's due for opening in August. And here's the building features. So we're looking at a building that can seat 200 plus people. So our biggest venue currently in Denmark is 140 seating. So this is a prime wedding venue as well. So we're bringing infrastructure. It has a northeasterly elevation, so it's very warm in winter. So it doubles up. We don't have a proper senior centre in Denmark. So if council was going to go and build a senior centre, we'd really be up for stumping up $2 to $3 million to build that facility. We'd then have to manage that facility. So we would then be, shelling out maybe probably $50,000 to $100,000 a year to maintain around that facility. The advantage from an economic perspective for council is that we've got a group of committed volunteers that for about a $500,000 contribution from council plus guaranteeing the self-supporting loan, we've really got this building that will be run and available to our community for no contribution from council. They may come back to us in 10 or 15 years' time and say we want to renovate the kitchen or do X or Y, and we'll give them another 50 or 60,000. It's an absolute bargain for our community. And so it's designed to have a manager and caterer, so maybe there's an extra 1 to 2 jobs coming into the Denmark economy there. It's an iconic location, so Denmark's really getting an entry statement done for very low cost. It's designed to be used by multiple groups in multiple configurations. And here's the funding model. So we've got a $500,000 grant from Commonwealth Regional Development Authority, Lotteries West grant, $271,000. Great Southern Development Commission were really sort of the saviour funder at the last minute. They came up with about $220,000 and maybe a little bit more. Shire of Denmark grant, $490,000. Riverside Club contribution, $280,000. Self-supporting loan, $450,000. And club income inputs comes up to $2.2 million project. So it's a really good example about how a club of about 120 seniors, by using, I guess, the resources in their community, a supportive council can leverage a very large project successfully. So it's around about a 9-to-1 leveraging, and the club model is sustainable without requiring ongoing government or council funding. It's designed to attract new members, and it'll be complete in August 2016. And the challenges in the project have been keeping the project and the group together. So we've managed to keep this project really rolling along, which is good, but in any group of people, there are people who love change, they live for change, and they're what you call your early adopters. There are other people who are a little bit slow with change. There are other people who come on with change when they see that it's actually got some momentum. And there are other people that are cautious about change, and there are other people that hate change. And we've still probably got about 10 or 15 members that really regret the fact that we demolished the old building, and they're really uncertain about this. But what we've done is we've sought to involve various groups in the club in the process. So one of the things we did was there's screening there. We got some of the members that are more artistic to actually put patterns on the screening, a Riverside scene, bit of an image of the club room. We've got some retired farmers, so the retired farmers had the job of relocating what was an equipment shed to be a temporary club room, so that was their part in that project. And one of the things that I've observed that the club has done really well is they've actually had a bit of a succession plan. So they've actually rotated and changed club presidents through the project. So the bowling club president early on in the project was a retired Army project manager. So he was very good at sort of giving momentum to the project and keeping it going forward, keeping it moving through council, keeping the funding applications on track, all of those sort of things. And then once the project was actually approved, they then changed club presidents to someone who was more social, someone who was a retired London businessman, who had a bit more of a presidential air about him, and he's just been very good at sort of shaking hands, coming to functions, doing those sorts of things. And it's also meant that the people haven't got burnt out. They've actually had, in effect, 2 project teams. A major project team that I'm involved with, which is really about sort of driving dates forward, finance, big decisions, and then they've had a management committee team, which is about the smaller issues like, well, how do we lay out the kitchen? What type of furniture are we getting? Where does this rack go? Where does that rack go, so that the project doesn't get bogged down? And we've worked very closely with them. Council's in effect been their bank to help them with cash flow, because $2.2 million project is a huge thing for a treasurer of a community group. So really what we've done is we've said, well, we'll be your bank. We'll, in effect, pay your invoices to the builder while you're waiting for the Commonwealth grant funding to come in, the Lotteries Commission funding. So that's actually worked very well. It's reduced stress levels at the project team. And another thing we did was we actually had a thing called a Richtfest, which is the architect's wife was German. So she was pregnant with her first baby. So one of the things we'd sort of noticed is in Germany you have a topping out festival. So when you get the roof pitched, you actually have like a banquet to thank the builders. So what we did was we got a bit of sheoak, which is kind of like a fir tree. We put it up on the ridge and we just had a small banquet. And we had one of my staff is South African, he's from a German background, so he speaks fluent German. So we actually had the speeches in German. And we had schnapps, and it was a really good sort of social event for the members to actually come down, have a look at the building, and just sort of celebrate how we'd gotten so far. And it was actually quite unique for Australians to actually thank a builder partway through a project. One of the things we tend to do is we just take that stuff for granted culturally, like we engage a contractor and we just say, well, your job is to build and to build quickly and build on time, and we don't actually stop to thank and appreciate people partway through. And it's really that sort of focus we've taken. Is we've been fortunate, we've engaged a very good builder, but it's just sort of kept relationships very social, very cordial and very enjoyable. And of course we've maintained good relationships with our Aboriginal elders as well. And one of the big problems we did have is that particularly the state government funding agencies looked at it as a front for the bowling club. They actually didn't fund the project. So then they said to us, well, this is just a front for the bowling club. So that was a little bit disappointing for us, but we kept on going anyway. And this is our retired farmers at work. So basically they just turned up and they put in a new concrete slab. They worked out that they could lift up the shed, and the rest of the club members trusted the retired farmers, and they lifted up the shed and it went on the new slab. And surprisingly enough, again, that engagement of members meant that there was a core of members that were committed to using the temporary clubhouse, because the members had gone from sort of their 1960s clubhouse to a shed. And so that was one of the big challenges about whether the members would take to that, whether morale would hold up, whether cash flow through the bar, which was sort of one of the ways the club were funding the project, would hold up. But sort of cause of people just sort of committed to it, and there's a real esprit de corps now with the temporary clubhouse. It's worked well. And that's it set up. And that's the screen painted by members. And I guess social and economic benefits, what it's enabled us to do is we have various groups coming through looking at Denmark. So the first sort of, I guess, social benefit is I managed to secure an AVAN convention. So these are what are called AVANs. You've probably seen, they're really cute campers. So in 2017, on the back of having a look at this project, having a tour of Denmark, and having a look at the plans, the AVANers decided to bring 300 AVANs to town. And so they'll come in late April. It's sort of the start of our off-peak tourist season. And they'll be here for a week. So they're planning to have their annual convention at the Riverside Club. And I guess here's some of the benefits. Not too sure how I'm going with time. Yep, good. So social benefits, what we've succeeded in achieving is we've transitioned the bowling club from a seniors bowling club into a multi-generational Riverside club. The seniors involved in the club now have engaging relationships with younger people in their 30s and 40s, 50s, and that's carrying over into other areas of the community. So now if you're a senior who was previously involved with a bowling club, maybe you were socially isolated, now you're meeting people who are into dragon boating, you're getting invited to things, you're maybe participating in other community groups yourself, so that's been really successful. All of the club members now have an engaging relationship with council. So as a result of myself being involved, a councillor being involved, those people now come and engage with council on all sorts of issues. So that's been very successful. The club, I guess, were very altruistic in their business planning. Like they've from day one said Riverside Club needs to be bigger than just Riverside Club. So they very actively budget to, even during their building program, to be donating at least $5,000 a year to other community groups. So that's a really good outcome. I've mentioned it before, the new club rooms will provide a warm winter meeting place for seniors in winter. Because that's one of the differences we have, is that a lot of our seniors don't come out to winter functions in the evening, just because most of our venues are too cold for them. And the new club rooms will be available for other clubs, such as bridge clubs, whatever, on a casual user basis. Economic developments. New club will employ a manager and caterers. That means at least another 2 jobs in town. There's been $2.3 million spent in the local region during construction. And so that overall sort of $6 million we've spent so far has seen a lot of young people retained in town as apprentices, successfully, developing into subcontract carpenters, grano workers, electricians and the like. New club rooms will be self-sustaining. So it won't stop council from taking on future projects because of the fact we're not having to think, okay, we've got to put in $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 a year to feed this. It's going to support itself. The new club rooms will and already does attract bowlers from inland towns who today trip to Denmark. And the exercise and wellbeing benefits associated with the club will help reduce direct and allied health service costs in Denmark. So there's a lot of good social support outcomes come from the facility. And that's it. Thank you.